I get why people look at you going like, is there something wrong with you? Like, my first time I went to Afghanistan was 2008, 2009. One of the worst, if not the worst tours the Marines ever did. I was in Sangin, DC, which was just the heart of darkness. IEDs everywhere. Friends died, people got injured, and it was really difficult, but it was also one of the best things I've ever done. Like, I'll never get a bond again like I did with those fellas then. I'll miss that probably till the day I die, is having all those friends around you. You do a thing called decompression when you come back from Afghanistan, where you went through Cyprus and you spent 3 days in Cyprus. You've had loads to drink, did a load of activities, and then that's the end. At the end of it, they go, right, that's you. You're all fit to go back to civilian life, and nothing prepares you for making that transition from being in a war zone to a week later being at home. I think because in the Marines, you've got this terrible association with cold water being punishment. You never get into cold water unless you're being punished for something. So for 15 years of my life, I associated with cold water with being punished. So every time I was getting in, it was only for a bad reason. You were never in there because it was nice or because it was a pleasure. You were getting punished. So I've taken that away from the military, going, actually, you know what? Being in the cold water isn't always a punishment. I need to stop associating the two together because it was awful. Like.
Have I got it wrong? Is I can't imagine. I mean, I guess there's punishment, but I hadn't thought about it as you continually being punished for stuff. Is that how it goes?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I think it's like, I think especially as a recruit or if you're junior in service, you get punished a lot more for things now. Obviously, having been a corporal for as many years as I was, having been in the Corps that many years and been around that much, I wasn't above punishment, but I wouldn't have been punished the way other people may have been, because it was like, I've been around long enough to know, someone says to me, get in that water for no apparent reason, I'm turning around and going, no, I'm not doing that, don't be silly. You know what I mean? There's other ways of doing this. But as a recruit, you're always punished, and it's always get in the cold water. Fully dressed, get in the cold water. It doesn't matter if it's night, day, you name it, in the cold water. And it was the fact that you were getting wet, it was cold, having to do all the admin of getting changed, having it washed, having it ready, all for the next day and the next inspection. And if you're getting that done to you 2 or 3 times a day, after 8 months of that, you're just like, I hate the cold water. I hate cold water.
Well, no wonder, really, if it's taking you back to like being punished as a grown up.
But it was like, I distinctly remember it was early February 2006, I think it would have been, and I remember being on the beach down in Exmouth, right about, it was between midnight and 2 o'clock in the morning, and we were just getting absolutely physically hammered on this cold beach, into the water, doing press-ups, sit-ups, GIG and stuff, out, rolling around the sand, then doing sprints. There was 2 hours of that in the middle of winter at night time, and it was like, it was horrific. Like, I don't think it happens as much now, because I think back in those days you were allowed to get away with more you could now. Like, I don't remember, whenever I was taking recruits through, I never had them doing something like at 2 o'clock in the morning, because it's suboptimum for what you want them to do the next day. They're going to be tired, exhausted, hungry, and then the next thing you'll say, right, I need you to do a full day's physical hard work at your best ability. But I just kept you awake half the night, getting you freezing and cold, and so it's if you're going to do something like that, it's about placing when it's done. So wait till the very end, the last night, when you're all going back tomorrow, whatever. If you do it every single night, eventually after a few days, they're going to be fit for nothing. So when you're actually wanting them to learn things or perform at a certain standard, they can't, because you spent the whole night previously thrashing them and stuff. So yeah, I think it was like, whenever I was a recruit, it was, you had all the information punished in there, whereas now they've realised that that's not the best way for people to learn. Because we would have spent if you were getting lectured on something, we would have spent the whole lecture just waiting to be punished. You're sitting waiting, when am I going to get punished for something? So you weren't actually taking in anything you were told.
Oh, so you think they were sort of going to punish you?
They would always find a way.
Really?
Information was punished in me. It was like, if you don't know something, it sounds ridiculous, but it's like, if you don't know something, the best way to make you learn is to punish you for not knowing it. And looking back on it now, you think that's ludicrous, but that's the way it was. Whereas I know now people are coached a lot more, and I know, especially with myself, whenever I had the recruits through, I would wait and sort of have all the punishments collected up in one big punishment at the very end. Once I've done all their learning, all right, you now owe me this, and I punish them then. But they've learned all they need to know. They're not sitting in a total state of, oh, I'm going to get punished any minute now for something, and that's the way it was then. Did it work for some people? Some people, that's the only way they learned. Me, I hated it. Hated being punished, like especially collective group punishments when you've got the same people always making mistakes and you're going, why am I always trying my hardest to get this done? I'm never getting caught doing something wrong, but I'm always getting punished. And you start to go, well, why do I bother? So I think in that sense, I know the course come along a long way. From when I was a recruit to when I was taking recruits through, the way things are all done is done very differently. And the recruits are all leaving training far more knowledgeable than I ever was. Far more knowledgeable. There's some people will argue, oh, they're softer and all, but I mean, I wouldn't have said that. Like, I wouldn't have said that. I think maybe some of the stuff that we were put through, and obviously people before us were put through worse, I would say, probably wasn't necessary and didn't really achieve much. But like I said, the recruits are coming out now more knowledgeable and more skillful than I ever was, whenever I passed out, which is a good thing. And they don't have a phobia of water.
Yeah, and generally being punished. What age were you when you joined the Royal Marines?
I was 22, passed out.
So not
I was slightly older.
Yeah, because so you didn't go in as a kid. And
No.
What age are you now?
40, just turned 40 there a few weeks ago.
Just turned 40. Okay, and you were so you starting in sort of early 2000s?
Yeah, 2005.
2005. Okay, and so you started a little bit late. Had you wanted to be in the military as a little kid, or?
Yes. Or for some reason, I think it ran in my family. So I remember my father, he was in the reserves, the Army Reserves, but he was also in the RUC. Obviously, at a time when ever being in the RUC over here was almost like being in the military anyway. I had grandparents and uncles who'd always done time in the military or the police. I remember being given a green beret from a guy in the SBS who was a friend of my father's. He gave me that. I remember being really young. He gave me that. And I always remember always wanting to be in the military and always the Marines, because it was kind of, I was told, that was the way to go. The Marines are the best and all this. You get told these things and you're like, oh, okay, I believe that. And in my mind, that's where I wanted to go. At the age of 16 or 17, got the paperwork, and then for whatever reason just didn't continue on with the process. Glad that I didn't, because I think between 16, 17, 18, and some 19-year-olds still aren't old enough for the Marines. I think it should be a minimum of 18, because it is physically demanding. I don't think they're mature enough mentally. They're not all of them, but I would say the vast majority of 16, 17-year-olds that I saw going through training weren't ready, and they weren't successful. Now, the ones that are ready are normally much more mature for their age, both physically and mentally. I personally think you should be 18 as a minimum age for the Marines, but it is 15 years and 7 months, I think it was. But it wasn't until I was 22 that I had a bit of life experience. I'd been a bouncer in Belfast from the age of 18. So from 18 to 22, I was a bouncer, joined the Marines. Luckily enough, passed out without any issues. Most of the time, people who don't pass out first time is because of injury. I was just lucky. I got through first time, and then that was me. So yeah.
So going back a step, when you're 18 to 22 and you're working as a bouncer, were you still thinking you're definitely going to be in the military, or were you not sure
No,
at that point?
I kind of, for the first time in my life, sort of forgotten about it. For some reason, I'd got the paperwork and going, I'm going to do this, and then I just got together with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, mother of all my kids. She got together with her, and it wasn't so much as she didn't want me to or anything, because I hadn't even discussed it with her. It was just something that I kind of forgotten about. And then when I was 21, I had an accident and I had to get reconstructive surgery on my hand and everything. And I kind of realized then, I was like, hold on a minute, you're not really going anywhere. You're 21 years of age, you've been a bouncer for 3 or 4 years. It's not a career. You're going to get into trouble with the police eventually, because that was the way it was going. And I went, I'll join the army. So joined the army and went into the careers office, and the army were like, right, you do the mental BARG test. And I passed it, which allowed me to do any job I wanted. So the sold, because I'd just also done a close protection course. So I was like, right, okay, what can I do? What can I do close protection in the military? They went, RMPs, the military police. Okay, I'll do that. Looking back at it now, I don't know what I was thinking, but yeah, I'll do that. So I went away, did the physicals over here to get in, and they said to me in the careers office, they went, listen, like, you've smashed all our army physical tests here. You've broken all the records that have been standing for years in this selection centre. They're like, are you sure this is the way you want to go? You want to go to the powers or anything? Again, I hadn't thought about it and was like, oh, I'll give it I don't know, think about it. Went back in the careers office in Belfast. Now it's over here, it's behind the wire, so it's on a military camp, obviously because of the troubles and the security issues. So it'd gone on, and there was a Marine on the front desk, and he ended up talking me into just putting the application form for the Marines in. And then next thing you know, that was it. The Marines managed to get me through the process quicker than the army did. And I was like, well, okay, I'll join the Marines there. That was me, gone. So yeah, it was just by sheer timing in the end.
And once you're in, because that's a big achievement, right? It's tough to get into the Royal Marines. And what's that feeling like once you're in?
It's very strange, because the whole way before you join up and the whole way through, you think there's going to be some sort of, like, when you get that day you're passed out, you're going to be the proudest man on earth, and it's going to be like, and it is, you're really proud and all, but you just want recruit training to be done. It's terrible, awful. And you just want to get recruit training done, and then you start. So the whole way through recruit training, you've been the lowest of the low, you're a recruit, and then you're going off to your unit where you're going to be the lowest of the low because you're the brand new Marine. But you're apprehensive and excited and everything else you can think of. And at the time as well was when Iraq was still going on, Afghanistan was still going on, there was loads of things. So you were nearly 99% sure you were going to get deployed somewhere within your first few years, which again was one of the reasons why I joined back up, because I saw it on the news and was like, right, you know what? I want to get involved in all this, which I think for people who joined round about my time, people forget that they joined knowing and wanting to go away and do ups. There was no like, you might not have to go away. People went, I want to join up because I want to go and do that. So, the lads that joined up at my age should be commended, because they knew exactly what they were themselves into. Whereas nowadays, you join up knowing that there's not an awful lot going on. So you're going to get a nice cushy number. All right, you're still joining the Marines. It's still difficult, but there's no doubt about it. But you're not going to go to Afghanistan. There's not any sort of real combat theaters on at the minute. There's training jobs and bits and bobs all over the place, but compared to the way it was then, there's nowhere near as much. So I joined up going, I want to do Afghan, I want to do Iraq, all these places. So yeah, again, you're passing out knowing that within your first few years, you're going to have to put everything you've learned to the test and actually use it. Whereas there's lads now passing out and they never get to use it in real life in a proper combat situation as such.
And what was the sort of timescale for you between deciding you want to do it, going and signing up, and actually going out to
really quick? It was really quick. So I ended up, I think, again, my career has been a lot. My career has been fantastic. Like, it genuinely is probably like very few other people's careers, with the jobs I've done, the places I've been, and I haven't got a bad word to say about it. But I passed out. It would have been early 2006. I passed out. Sorry. So by 2000 and by early 2007, I'd already gone away and done Iraq anti-piracy operations around Somalia. And then I came back and went to Afghanistan in the middle of 2008. So my first few years were spent away all the time. I was never home. It was brilliant. I loved it. It was people don't understand that, and I get like why people don't understand that. But if you imagine being a teacher, going to university, trained to be a teacher, you want to then go and teach, don't you? Well, the same goes for being the Marines or the Army. You've learned all this stuff. You want to go away and actually use it. Otherwise, I question why somebody does it in the first place. If you want to learn all this but never use it, then you think to yourself, well, I don't understand that. But
Yeah,
that's what I think. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it makes perfect sense. I was just thinking as you said that, because as a non-military person, you're saying you've had a fantastic career and then your face lights up. And the next question in my head is, what are the highlights of this fantastic career? But then you start talking about things. You mentioned a couple of things which you can go into detail about, but things that perhaps to other people sound scary as fuck. The closest I've got to anti-piracy operation is that film with Tom Hanks, which was very good from my point as a film. I'm not sure how accurate it was. Maybe you could tell me, but yeah, you do all these things, and I guess this is the thing. You're in the military doing things that a lot of people would find terrifying, but I guess you're having fun, right?
It doesn't, like, logically, when I explain these things to people, I can hear myself and I'm going, it sounds ridiculous. The things I'm saying don't make sense. And I get why people look at you going, like, is there something wrong with you? Because like my first time I went to Afghanistan was 2008, 2009, probably one of the worst, if not the worst tours the Marines ever did. And certainly amongst the whole of the military, it was one of the hardest. We had a huge casualty rate. I was in Sangin, DC, which was just the heart of darkness, IEDs everywhere. And, friends died, people got injured. And it was really difficult, but it was also one of the best things I've ever done because it was simple. I was there with my friends. Every single one of those friends was there to look after me as much. Again, I was in a position of responsibility, so I was a section commander for up to 10 people. So they were all my responsibility. Now, bearing in mind, I hadn't been passed out of the Marines that long myself, really. But I was just, I don't know whether it was just luck or what it was, but I ended up being reasonably good at it. And I took these 10 fellas, and brought them away with me, and they were mine. They were like my own little group, and you'll never have a bond like you did. Like I'll never get a bond again like I did with those fellas. And it was just, for a fact everyone was looking after each other. It was just, and it's hard to explain. It is that sort of camaraderie thing that whenever I left the military, it's probably been the hardest thing to adjust to, is not having that. It's been, and one of the reasons why I joined the job I'm in now in the police was because I thought that's the closest I'll get, to that. And it doesn't even come close. It's not even close at all. But yeah, I think for a lot of guys leaving, especially, I know for myself anyway, that's the hardest thing is leaving the lads behind and that life you had with the lads. I love my family, I love my kids, love being here with my family and my kids. Wouldn't change that for the world, but I'll miss that probably till the day I die, is having all those friends around you. And especially in that sort of environment where it is difficult and it's a shared hardship, but that shared hardship brings us all closer together. And I do think that's probably what I would advise anybody leaving the military to be prepared for. If you've been away in those types of theatres and you've experienced that level of friendship and you've been in those scenarios where you've all had people, injured or killed, when you come away from that, you do feel totally lost on your own. And that's, that would probably be the hardest thing that I've experienced so far.
You're talking about feeling lost and alone when you leave the military, or when
When
you
you
get back
leave, yeah,
after,
when you leave,
when you
yeah.
leave.
Because if you think about, you know, when you're on a camp Monday to Friday, you know, you're working, but you're also living with these people. So you're literally spending, you know, every moment you're awake with the same groups of people. You know, and that's for weeks and weeks and weeks at a time. It's hard not to get those sort of friendships that are, you know, so close that when you do, you feel like you're sort of stripped away from them. And most of the time, you'll go your separate ways. You never hear from each other again, or it's very rarely that people will keep in touch, you know, forever. Um, but yeah, for me, it was definitely the hardest part. Was trying to. I've tried to replace that, and it just can't. You know, and I've had to sort of accept that it won't be. I couldn't replace that. You know, I'll not be able to replace the feeling of adrenaline you get when you're, you know, in a contact or something's happened. You won't be able to replace those feelings of friendship and camaraderie that you had, you know, when you're out in those places. Um, and that's definitely something I don't think is taken into account when you leave. I think it's very much, you know, the military go, well, we'll prepare you for leaving, you know, for getting jobs and CV writing and stuff. But it is almost, you know, you do a thing called decompression when you come back from Afghanistan, where you went through Cyprus and you spent 3 days in Cyprus. You've had loads to drink, did a load of activities, and then that's at the end of it, they go, right, that's you. You're all fit to go back to civilian life, and you're like, at the time, all you want to do is come home, but it doesn't. You know, nothing prepares you for making that transition from being in a war zone to a week later being at home. Now, that's knowing that you're still going to go back to your friends. Can you imagine doing that, leaving the military completely, and that's it? You know, those friends are gone now. You know, you're never going to have that same sort of feeling and experiences that you had then. And you just, after a while, you do start to feel really lonely. Because
As
it's hard to explain to people.
Well, I
Become,
think. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, but I think it has to be hard to explain, because it's hard to get your head around from the outside as well. What I was going to ask was, um, as you were getting towards the time that you knew you were going to leave,
Mhm.
did you have any concept of just how difficult it was going to be? Because there must be a part of your sense when you're having these great adventures, which obviously great highs and then the
Yeah.
terrible lows of losing friends and stuff. Did you kind of, did you feel at the time that life's never going to be like this again? Or then when you're getting towards leaving, did you have some sense that this is probably going to be hard and what am I going to do about it? Or did it just hit you hard when you had left?
I was in a strange place because I had come back. I had come back over here for a personal matter, and that's when the lockdown happened. So I was here for nearly a year during the lockdown period. And then I had another 6 months to do before I left the military completely. So I almost had a year and a half of being separated. But in your mind, you can sort of go, right, I know this is going to happen, and people will explain to you, you'll probably feel this way, etc., etc. I had no idea how bad it would be until probably a year, maybe after I left. So it didn't hit me straight away.
So
It
that
took a
big
bit
long
of time.
period, you were fine, and then
Yeah, I mean, I think it was probably gradually working on me, but I didn't, you know, I wasn't going, oh, I really miss being in the military. I really want to go back. You just kind of you feel like there's something missing. So
yeah.
you don't really know what it is. And then when you sit down and think about things and you talk to different people, like I have a few friends over here now who've left the military, and they feel exactly the same way as I do. Excuse me, but yeah, I don't think you can't fully prepare yourself for it. And maybe my experience is different. Well, it will be different to everybody else's. Maybe some people who are leaving the military are leaving because they're bitter about being in the military, or they want to leave because they don't like the job or the people they're with. You know, their experience is going to be completely different to mine. Um, I didn't leave because I didn't like the job or I had anything against the job, because I loved it. It was because my family, I spent so much time away from my family that it was like, you know, I had to almost pick one. Um, and I wasn't gonna, you know, couldn't not pick my family. So I've moved back over here. Um, the relationship with my kids and all so much better. I've had another baby and all since. in that sense, fantastic. But as far as work and career and things go, you're always comparing it to that last job, and it's hard not to, but it's something you can't do. I have to make a real conscious effort. I find myself going, this wouldn't happen in my old job, or my friends and my old job wouldn't have done that or said that. And you can't live like that, and you have to just accept that that's it, it's gone, it's finished. And people have said about joining the reserves and things, but I think it's, for me, I had to just make a clean break. I was in the Marines, I'm now gone, and that's it. It can't be any other way. I can't be half in, half out.
And were you leaving? Were you always going to join the police right away, or did you take some time? And
no, I basically joined the police while still in the Marines, and once the police came through and said, "Yeah, we've got a job offer for you," that's when I handed my notice in. For me, there wasn't really. Even now thinking about it, I don't know what else I would do. I don't. 15 years in the Marines, you come away from it fantastic at being a Marine, but as far as civilian life goes, you don't learn a trade or anything as such. So, I was coming away after 15 years with not an awful lot of extra paper qualifications to go, yes, you can do this. Being in the Marines has given me loads and loads and loads of tools that I can use in any job, but nothing as a certificate or a bit of paper that says, you're actually really good at this. So joining the police, I was like, well, it's probably one of the few jobs where my skills are transferable, especially over here, because the police over here are all armed. Obviously, a terrorist threat is still here, and there still is that sort of security issue that isn't really encountered as much over in the rest of the UK. But for me, it was the only job really I could think of doing that I could go, well, actually, there's opportunities within that may be closer to the military than anything else I could do. So that was kind of my thinking on the.
And when you're a new recruit in the police, then Keith, are you treated differently from, because someone could be like a kid with no experience, and you've come in with years of high level military experience? Are you treated differently, or?
The police over here is probably the most scrutinised police force in the world. So they are so careful about making everything even and fair. So I'll speak to people and they'll say, you should be fast tracked into this job or this role. And it would make sense to do that, but they can't be seen to make any sort of favourites or any allowances for anybody. So I was treated exactly the same as everyone else. Not really. No, I wouldn't say I was treated any differently. When I passed out from being a recruit to an actual police station, there may have been more sort of leeway given to me insofar as they're going, well, he's a bit older, he's got all this experience, so maybe he doesn't need to be babysat just quite as much. Or people will look at me and go, well, actually, you know what, he's probably able to handle himself in this situation. Or in some cases, they're probably thinking, actually, I'd rather him than somebody who's done the police for 5 years, because not necessarily being in the police for 5 years doesn't necessarily mean you're tactically sound. Now, the Marines didn't prepare me to be in the police at all, insofar as like the way I would how do I put this? The way the Marines is probably makes me worse at being in the police, because everyone's very straight down the line in the Marines. If somebody's doing something and it can be solved by telling them off in a certain way, that's the way you do it in the Marines. In the police, you can't. Things have to be dealt with a certain way.
Winding back to when you were a kid,
yeah.
You mentioned being a bouncer.
Yeah.
Did you have, and you said you did a close protection course. Was that before you joined the military?
So what happened was, I'd been a doorman for probably 3 years, and then a guy I know had said about doing close protection work. And I thought, I'm not being in the military, like, what do I know about close protection? Turns out that you don't have to be in the military to do close protection work. Went away, did a course. I think I finished second out of 15 people on the course. A lot of those have been ex-police. So whether they were just really bad in the police and the military, I don't know, or maybe I was just lucky. But I passed the course pretty well. Did a few small jobs, but see, as long as you're not in a job where you're carrying a weapon, you learn everything you need to know. I think looking back on it now, I wouldn't have bothered with a close protection course because it hasn't really paid in the long run. But at the time, I didn't know that. Money in Iraq and things was huge. I think where people were getting paid £500 a day, and all I saw was £500 a day. I'll take that. Obviously, looking back at it now, you need to have the military experience, the weapons experience, and stuff. But the CP course I did a few jobs. Again, nothing major. And then I think it was after when I did a CP job in Paris, and I came back from it and went, do you know what? The only way I'm going to be able to utilize this is if I actually go and do 4 years in the military. So the intention was do my 4 years, come out, go and earn huge amounts of money in Iraq or Afghanistan doing CP.
So you were enjoying your time in the military so much that you wanted to stay?
Once I was in for a year, I was like, I can't see me leaving this. I realized straight away, I was like, this is where I want to be. And I think I always lent into the job in the military because it was like I always want to do something different. I always want to retrain in something or do a different job. So I ended up doing jobs that people only ever hear about in films and stuff. And they're like, is that really a job? And you're like, yeah, it is, And
like, what sort of things are you thinking when you say that?
So I was a helicopter sniper for 3 years. And out of those 3 years, I was an instructor for 2. So again, not many people can turn around and say they spent years hanging out of a helicopter, firing sniper rifles. Again, doesn't really help me in the police. Doesn't help me as a job in Tesco's or anywhere else. So although it was brilliant in the Marines, doesn't serve me outside of the Marines.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you think, as well as not having the things on paper, do you think it's partly there's a squeamishness of people outside the military? Because you start talking about because I think people, they like the idea of having peacekeeping forces and things like this, but when it gets down to the nitty gritty of what you actually have to do in the military, and you can maybe see a bit of this in the blowback from what Prince Harry said about how many, his maybe ill-advised body count that he shared with us. I think when people talk about what they actually do in the military, the people who don't like to talk about these things are a bit sort of like, oh, don't tell us about the killing side.
Yeah. Well, again, this is why everybody is one of the reasons why I am like the most unpoliced person in the world, because a lot of people just think, if you're in the Marines, you don't know how to stop killing. It's like you just walk down the street killing everything. And it's not like that at all. You're probably better suited to control that anger, aggression, because you've done it for the last 15 years. But some people just seem to think that all you've done your whole life is just kill people everywhere you go. You can't control it. You're just some sort of maniac. And it's not the case. I remember having protesters outside Faslane Naval Base. So we used to go out for a run and you'd come in and you'd have these protesters that tended to be either young students or pensioners, in their 60s. And that have been shouting things like, you're baby killers and stuff. And you're like, I'm not, but that's how they saw you, as some horrible baby murdering force. And you're like, it's not.
Is this something that you saw that happened a lot to you? You saw a lot.
Yeah, it happened. Now, I don't think it's happened for a lot of years, but when I first went to Faslane, every day there had been protesters at the front gate, and as you came in or out, they were shouting at you or hurling abuse at you, or they were laying down the road, stopping vehicles coming in and out and all. And they would have said things like, baby killers and things like that. And they're just like, that's how they actually see you. It couldn't be further from the truth.
I remember hearing about the protesters, and I suppose you'll know this, but I guess it's worth reminding yourselves that it's as you say, it's a particular group of people. I think it's a fairly very narrow section of people, and there's groups of people that get worked up and angry about all kinds of different things.
Do you know what? I'm more than happy to let them protest it's, they can have whatever views they want. It doesn't bother me at all. But it becomes a bit more than that when you start saying things like these are all baby killers. Some of the guys I was running with were probably only 17 or 18 themselves. Have never been away anywhere, and you're thinking, how are you now looking at us?
If they actually say baby killer, I mean, that line's used in First Blood, right?
Yeah.
That's what it's because that's what I think that's what Sylvester Stallone Rambo's had when he came back from Vietnam. So they're not even thinking of like original things to shout at you. Thinking like, someone said the people in the military are baby killers. You are a baby killer.
Yeah, they're all baby killers. But I mean, luckily enough, nobody I was with or nobody I had the pleasure of working with ever took any offense at it. They just went, all right, whatever. It's totally up to you. If that's what you want to think of us, then fair enough. But definitely, it wasn't the case. That's not. I've never experienced people who have such a bloodlust and thirst that they're going around murdering people. No, definitely not. Definitely not. I don't think that would be the common views on the military. I think it's just like you said, it's like a niche group of people who feel that way. But
I think there's a niche group of people who think well, we'll go and actually shout angrily at people. But then there is quite a large section of people who, I used the word squeamishness before, and I think it's like they know the military's there, but they don't really want to think too hard about the nasty.
Let's be completely honest. I think in its worst case, that is the job of someone in the military, is to close and kill the enemy. Right? That is like worst case scenario. That is their job. But it's not as common as people think it is. It's not, especially now with the likes of Afghanistan and Iraq being over. You'll maybe have years and years and years and groups of people coming through the Marines and the Army who never, ever, ever get into a gun battle with anybody. Whereas obviously for a period of sort of 10 plus years, you had most of the people coming through at some stage will have been in a contact. So it goes in like sort of ebbs and, it changes quite often. So you'll have this decade where it's really busy, maybe a decade where it's not. So like my experiences are going to be different to somebody joining up now. And in 10 years' time, they'll probably go, I didn't really do anything for 10 years. Whereas, like I said, the likes of the people who joined whenever I joined up will have gone, I was away X amount of times and saw all these different things. So again, it's what I take away from my time will be different to what someone else takes away in 10 years' time.
You mentioned before kind of breezing through your selection process. Were you like a star athlete growing up, or?
No, I mean, star athlete. If you ask my mother, she'd tell you he was the best athlete in the world.
Got the trophies out.
Yeah. I was always pretty good at sport. I always played. I spent my whole life doing some sort of martial arts. BJJ wasn't a thing whenever I was younger. It wasn't around. I'm sure yourself. BJJ didn't really come here until about 15 years ago, if even that.
15 years ago there was some, but it wasn't. You had to.
It wasn't massive. It wasn't like now. Everybody does BJJ. Everyone does BJJ now. Whenever I started off, it was judo, and then it was like sort of Mugendo kickboxing, then Thai boxing, then MMA came in, and then BJJ all came in. So I spent my whole life doing that. I played rugby for Ulster and all your schoolboy sports and all throughout. But definitely not by any means a star athlete, no. It's just one of those. I still maintain that I was just lucky not to get injured, through training. A lot of people who were much better athletes than me didn't get through because they were injured. And some of them were injured so badly that they were never able to pass out. But I think the core is good at. You'll get people who, I talk about this today to people, you'll get somebody who's a fantastic athlete who has never been tried in his whole life. He's always been first. Every sport he's done, been top at. You get to the Corps or the Army, and they will break every single person. It doesn't matter how good you are, they will break you. Now, if you've never been broken or you've never come under such pressure that you're feeling like you have to just keep grinding away. Those people come to the Marines, get broken, don't like feeling the way they do. They feel like, well, this is really unpleasant. I've never experienced this hardship before. A lot of them then crumble. Whereas you get lads who are average, are used to grinding away, and they'll just grind the whole way through training. They'll never be the best or the worst, but they're just grinding away day in, day out, and they make it out the other side. And that's all it is just having that mentality just to keep grinding away.
And they sort of, from what I hear, they want that as much as they want star
100%.
quality. They want you to be able to, what's it they say, cheerfulness in the face of adversity.
Face of adversity. And that's, I mean, it is very true. And it's also about how you are as a team, because you could be the best athlete in the world, get everywhere first. But once you get to where you need to be, if you're no good at doing your actual job, you may as well never have been there in the first place. So yes, fitness is a huge thing in the Marines, but you have to be good at your job, because otherwise, what's the point of being in there? So a lot of the time you had lads who maybe weren't the best athletes, but they were actually good at being, a soldier or a Marine. And again, that gets them through, because I would rather have somebody who takes a bit longer to get somewhere, but once they get there, they know how to do their job, than somebody who gets there really quickly, but once he's there, is no use to anybody. And it's you see it a lot when you go to the likes of Afghanistan all as well. Nobody knows how they're going to react in those situations until you're actually there. Everyone would like to think that act a certain way. Before I got the likes of Afghanistan, I didn't know how I was going to react to them. Thankfully, I never had any issues.
Well, how you going to react when it kicks off? Basically, you mean?
Yeah, because I mean, most people in life have never been in that scenario until you get to somewhere like Afghanistan. You can always in your mind go, this is exactly what I would do, but you don't know about it. You don't know exactly what you would do until you get there and do it. And I've seen some lads who, in your mind, you're thinking, whenever it kicks off, he's going to be no good to anybody. And then when it kicks off, you're like, oh, he knows what he's up to. There's other people who you think, probably the hardest bloke in the world. It kicks off, and you're surprised at how differently they react to it than how you expected them to react. So again, you then learn a person's true personality in those situations. And there's some people who maybe you didn't have an awful lot of faith in. By the time you come back after 6 months, you're like, I am totally safe in that person's hands. There's some people you think, I can trust them 1,000,000%, and then afterwards you're like, probably not as much as I thought.
Yeah, so you don't know how you're going to react till you're out there. I talked to a guy from the US Special Forces, retired, and he talks about the first time he was on operations and they started coming under fire. And he admits to sort of freezing, but he said it was probably a split second. He said freezing, didn't know what to do. And he looked around, and the guys who'd been more experienced with them, and they were basically having a laugh, like making jokes and stuff. And he was like, "Oh, fair enough.
Yeah,
this is the way to get through." And then he just realised you're still going to do your job, but you're not going to care, because they're all just playing around, and they're not playing around because it's not serious. It's just their way of.
Yeah, I mean, I have a photo somewhere, and it's a photograph of me behind the wall, and I'm doing the same. I'm laughing, and I remember when the photo was taken, and we were in the middle of a contact, and again, that was probably over halfway through. So you'd been in these situations, and you had become not numb to them, but you do get used to them, and the sort of this is what's quite frightening. You start to lose not the adrenaline, but it becomes a bit more you become a bit more blasé to it. You're like, oh, another one of these. And it's almost like the more you get into them, the more numb you come to them. And there's a photo of, like, me laughing. And then not long after that, I have to put my head above the wall and fire back. It's not natural or normal to have bullets coming at you and put your head up above the wall. Nobody wants to do that. It's not a natural thing. Everything in your body's telling you, stay here, you're safe. You know what I mean? Nothing's coming through here, but you have to obviously win the firefight. And like I said, just before I put my head above the wall, I'm laughing. It's nothing funny about it, but it's just how you do tend to deal with it in certain different ways. And I know the Corps, their sense of humour, cheerfulness in the face of adversity is a massive deal. And again, there's 6 7 months in that first Afghan. Some things we went through were terrible, but again, it was that cheerfulness and those friendships and bonds that get you through it. And I think that's what makes it so hard when you do leave, is because you can never recreate that, never.
So if we could talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind. So when you
Mm-hmm.
when kind of it's hit you that you've left this thing
Yeah.
behind, was it sort of do you have a sort of terrible realization one day, or does the feeling creep in? And how do you deal with it when those feelings come?
For me, it crept in, and I think I didn't realize what the feeling was until a while later. And every once in a while, it's kind of like it's not always there. Every once in a while, something will happen, and I'll go, and it'll come back to me, and I'll think about it. I tried to deal with it in different ways. I got involved with reorg, and helped raise some of the money during the rollathon stuff for them. Again, at the time, I didn't realize it, but all I was trying to do was reconnect with those bootneck roots. When I sort of got involved with it, I didn't realize that's why I was doing it. But I think looking back at that was one of the reasons. Again, thanks to the BJJ and stuff, the gym I train at, it's a guy, Mike Summers at Forge. He he and the gym make you feel really welcome. There's no, I've been to other gyms where you've gone in and straight away you feel uneasy. You're like, don't know about this place. That gym welcomes you straight away, and it does become like a big family. Now, it's not, the gym itself, isn't, definitely nowhere near 100 people. Maybe you're only talking 50 people in the gym, 40 people in the gym, but everybody knows everybody else. And if you don't know them, there's still group chats where everyone discusses things and chats about things and all. So again, there's another way that I'm trying to sort of fill that void. The job I'm in now, you've got, there's a certain group of people. There's probably eight people who in that there's 28 people in the section, and there's a group of eight of us who I would be very close to, and they were probably the closest thing to having friends in the core as you can get. So again, there's another way I'm trying to fill it. So I think you'll spend maybe your whole life, I don't know, trying to find things that'll fill that void and that gap. So far for me, nothing has filled it. Maybe it's just one of those things that eventually you grow comfortable with and realize that that's, you won't fill it. So you just try and make do what you've got. Obviously, my family, was a huge deal for me. That was the main reason why I left, and the family being here is a massive deal. Worst case scenario is I've always got them no matter what. So that fills a huge gap in that. The friendships that I lost out on. So yeah, there is ways of filling it, but I think everyone's different. Sometimes I'd rather just be on my own, which doesn't make sense. If I'm saying about you have all these friendships that you're missing all so much, but then sometimes you're just like, I just want to be on my own. So yeah, it's difficult. I don't know. I don't have a definitive answer as to how you would fill that. I don't have no idea. I'm still trying to find different ways. But
Did you always stay in shape? Did you always
so
train?
right up until the last 18 months, I would train at least once, if not twice a day, religiously. If I missed a day, it was like the world's come to an end. You'd look yourself in the mirror and you're like, you put on 4 stone of fat in a day and all. It's completely ridiculous. The last 18 months, things have gone, especially with the injury I picked up 6 weeks ago. Well, not 6 weeks ago, say 4 weeks ago in the rollathon. Since then, I've done no training at all. My training in the last 18 months is nowhere near what it used to be. So again, there's a whole lot of things that I'm now looking at going, I need to get myself back on top of that. Maybe a lot to do with having structure. I'm terrible for needing structure. In the Marines, you've got structure. Even on a day where anything can happen, there's still a certain amount of structure to it. I've let my structure go out the window, especially because of shift work and different work patterns. So I need to try and find some sort of structure that I can build around that to get me back into training. But again, with the BJJ and stuff, I can't do anything like that really until February, till I finished, getting over my injury. So until then, I'm sort of stuck. But that's something that I've let go as well. But that's all me. There's no excuses.
Yeah,
That's
but it's,
100% my fault.
sorry, I'm to interrupt. It's not on you, but you're completely right that I think for most people, yeah, you're right. Structure is very important, and I think whatever your work or home life allows, getting the regular training in is hugely important. I know for me, if I don't train, I quickly see
Yeah.
things go downhill.
Yeah.
So then for me, it's just a decision of deciding whatever else I'm going to get the training in, even if I've got to get up while everyone else is in bed to do it. I'm going to train, and you just see the difference. The problem is, obviously, if you choose something like jiu-jitsu as we have, you're going to crack the odd rib occasionally, and then you've got to have something to do while you're broken. That's the thing. I balance jiu-jitsu with yoga because I got to the point of injuries building up, and so it's either one or the other. But obviously, you need a degree of mobility to be able to do that. But yeah, I think I think you're right. You probably never are going to get what you had in the military, but it's a question of having enough of a structure and enough of a balance to keep yourself sane, I suppose. I think as soon as you start making those comparisons and thinking, what is possible now. I mean, you don't really know. I mean, I'd done martial arts growing up, but I didn't start jiu-jitsu properly till I was 41, I think it was. I'm 49 now, and I'm in much better shape at nearly 50 than I was at 40 because, I mean, I was a bit younger then, so obviously there's more wear and tear, and certain things become more difficult. But I would hate to go back 10 years and to not have the skills I've learned in my 40s.
I think as well for likes of the police and things, BJJ is very good because a lot of the time if you're in sort of a situation where you're having to get hold of somebody and restrain them, I think BJJ and judo are probably the two best sports in that sense because in judo, to a lesser extent BJJ, but the judo will help you bring somebody from a stand-up position to the floor, and then the BJJ will obviously help you get them under control. So I think the police should definitely look at introducing a form of BJJ or its own sort of type of BJJ into the police. I think it'd be really handy. And obviously, you can't choke people and things, but there's bar choking people. There's a million other ways you can use BJJ to help in the policing environment.
When you're out in the police, how often does it get pushy shovey? And
do you know what? The place, the area I work in, has no rhyme or reason to it. So if a Monday morning at 7 o'clock could be like a Saturday night kicking out time, and anywhere else in the country, it literally is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So you could go 3 or 4 shifts with nothing, and then for the next 3 shifts in a row, or something happens, or the next 3 calls, something like you just don't know. And I think depending on who you're working with can dictate how a situation changes. If you are with somebody who is timid or is a bit quieter, a lot of people will take that as a weakness, and straight away they're thinking that they can up the ante on the situation to a point and win. Whereas if you're with 2 or 3 people who are maybe more intimidating or carry themselves in a different way, the same person could come, they could look at the police in a totally different way and go, do you know what, actually, there's no way I'm going to come out better in this situation. So they'll come quietly. I think it just depends. For me, it's not very often. So far, touch wood, I've been in very, very few and none that have caused me an issue yet. But I know other people who have been, had parts of their ear bitten off, back of their neck bitten. I know a girl was head butted. But like, for instance, the girl that was head butted, she was head butted by a person who apparently, would tend to resist police quite a bit. And in other dealings with him, he's been quiet because he's maybe been with a group of male police officers who you just don't know. You really couldn't sort of guess, or in the next 4 shifts it'll happen to me twice. You just don't know. You don't know at all.
I guess you're there and you can handle yourself, but you might be with people who aren't that well trained.
Mm.
Some of your
I
colleagues.
mean, I think the idea of defending yourself within the police, it's taught at a very very low level because obviously it has to be, um, and I think it almost teaches people to be overcautious. Because if you think if people say to you, as a police officer, can you punch someone in the face? Well, yes, I can do anything up to shooting somebody as long as it can be justified. Ideally, obviously, you want to come out of every shift having no issues at all. But you're taught to use your different methods of, powder spray and buttons and whatever else you have at your disposal. But if you can be taught how to subdue the situation verbally, posturing, and then physically without ever having to take a baton out or a pava spray out, is that not better than having them potentially hurt somebody a bit more seriously? I think so, but it's how much time and effort would it take to teach people who've never done anything like that before in their lives to be proficient enough to carry something out? And that's the other issue. Help for the military out when you leave in the UK is probably not that bad. In Northern Ireland, there's very few organisations that are known about, or I couldn't give you the names of any that would help people. So I thought, right, if I am currently, in the role I'm in at the minute, I come across other members of the police, fire service, paramedics, and what have you. So if somebody was in need of help, I could potentially come across those people and help them. BJJ can be used in instead of traditional methods of dosing people up with tablets or whatever else methods are used. I think giving them the opportunity to try BJJ either instead of or as well as those methods is fantastic because it does offer so much. Yeah, that was the whole point of me getting involved with the reorg BJJ sort of thing, was I could get something from it personally, but also I can help others.
Well, that's the fantastic thing about it, because I've spoken to loads of people who've been really helped by it. But every single one of those, when they've been helped by it, the next thing they're doing is seeing who else they can help because they've seen what it does for them. And by the way, sometimes like immediately, as in you walk into a class, you go out, and I've felt like it's not, you go and you come out a completely different person. And a lot of people I've spoken to, it's literally sort of one day they train one day and they go, right, it doesn't mean all my problems are magically over, but I know I've taken a mentally and physically important step towards fixing whatever it is that's going on. And you sort of see that chink of light and you think, all I've got to do is keep showing up. And they want to tell other people about it.
You've got a support system there in place. And I can only speak on behalf of Forge Gym where I train. Because I know that gym, I know that if you do come into the gym, you're immediately sort of welcomed. You're part of the family, and you do have a support system there. If you've come from the military or somewhere, and you've got that piece of your life missing, like I've been talking about for the last hour or whatever, that can go some way to replacing it. If all of a sudden you've gone from having a group of like-minded people who you spend a lot of time with in your life stripped away from you, you then go into a BJJ gym or any other gym, and you've got like-minded people that you're maybe not spending as much time with, but you're still spending an hour a day with, all of a sudden, it's not quite as bad as it was before you did that. And it's because it's helped me massively. I mean, me personally, I spent 15 years of a support network around me without ever having to ask for it or think about it. It was just always there, and then it's gone. So you feel lost and lonely. And then when you think there, because it used to be, you would come in and go, say to the lads in work, oh, I've got this issue. And although they would probably rip the piss out of you, and you would never get a straight answer from anybody, but at least eventually you would get to the root of the problem and you would talk about it and do whatever. It's the same in going into the gym. You could go into a gym, and once you've made enough connections, you can say to people, this is the issue I've got, and all of a sudden you're talking about it.
You're absolutely spot on, mate. Well, listen, we better wrap it up, but it's been fantastic to talk to you.
Yes, appreciate the company bringing me on, man. I really do.
We could talk about it for hours, and there's various stuff we've only just touched on, but I mean, it's good to hear that you're pushing the message out that it doesn't, and your final point, it doesn't have to be jiu-jitsu. It can be anything that kind of, you know, keeps your body working, takes your mind away from the silly things it might be worrying about, is going to make a difference for people, you know. And it's great that
hopefully that the message does get pushed out. Like I said, I've got my social media pages that I'm using as a way to try and push out the message, promote questions, discussions, you know, of things, and maybe not even, it might not even have me directly involved. Someone else can ask a question or put up a discussion on the social media page, and it can be end up being a conversation between different people, whatever, you know, as long as the questions are answered, or if people are not wanting to, you know, if they don't want to ask them directly, they can speak to me or somebody else, or they can just follow my progress, and hopefully that's enough to show them that, you know, if I can do it, anybody can do it. Really, let's be honest. But yeah, hopefully, again, with a reorg, and anywhere we can push the message out about mental health and not having to do it on your own. And there's not just tablets and traditional ways of doing things. There's other ways of doing it. But yeah, hopefully it gets out there. But yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing me on, have the discussion, and letting me rabble on for the last hour and a half.
Perfect. No, it's great to talk to you, mate. You're speaking to the choir here. They're singing to the choir, whatever the expression is. Okay, mate. That's fantastic. Keith Hughes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Cheers for your time, mate.